with that said, I'd like to also ask Matt when they come up if they could talk about the solar ordinance and where it's at. Now, I'm going to push pause for a second here. I don't know if our audience can hear us. Kelly Corman, can you hear us?
It's really bad audio.
Okay. Andrew.
Can't hardly hear Kelly either.
Andrew's in there. Andrew, we're having some, he's working on it. Any better now, Kelly?
Yeah, it's getting better. There's a lot of cracking.
Yeah.
Can't hear Kelly.
Yeah, and Kelly, we can't hardly hear you. Can you turn up your microphone? We can hardly hear you.
It's okay.
All right. We'll move forward. So we have our guests, and I'm going to go ahead and ask Matt and Ben to step to the podium, and John and Chief Ward and Chief Canavy are here as well. Matt, could you address the court? And I shared your email, and here's just cutting to the chase, the bottom line. Our concern is, and it's been voiced to me by Mr. Wallace and Mr. Lyons and several of our magistrates, about the concern of having adequate size water supply and water lines, and also fire hydrants and fire protection on new development. And how can we address that and make sure that as we go forward that we do that?
Yeah.
That's the crux of it. Any on the court, if y'all want to add anything, please do so, but I think it's important.
Yeah, and this was brought up in our discussions about the water tanks on the south part of Scott County. And Judge, I think in the email would like to talk about the conditional use permits at the end of this presentation.
Let me add that to the list.
But I think it's the Judge has taken what exactly my concerns are as far as moving forward.
Yeah. So I guess just briefly, when somebody approaches us about a new neighborhood out in the county, we review all of those, by what is on the books as far as our regulations. Whether that's density for how many houses per acre, or the construction of the roads which are set in the subregs, stormwater management, things like that. Sizing of water lines isn't something that's in our regs. That's something that is typically worked out between the developer and the water service provider. I'm sure, and Ben can elaborate on this, there's a lot that goes into that. As far as hydrant spacing, I know inside the city, we have I think it's a one hydrant per 300 feet.
For commercial.
For commercial.
For residential.
Okay. And for the county, Ben, I think you had shared what we had as a standard by email.
It's 500 feet.
Yeah. So that's the standard that's in our regs now as far as how far apart hydrants should be for residential development in the county is 1 per 500 feet. Granted, once again, and I think some of this is what you guys had talked about last week is, as far as the water pressure and the sizing of the lines, that's not something that's in our regs. That's not something that we review. That's really just between the developer and the water service provider.
But in my mind, we should, going forward, in my humble opinion, we should consider how do we make sure that happens. Yeah. This body, and Tim and I have talked about this before. I mean,
is Georgetown Water not making that happen as those?
Well, let me answer. I'm sorry and I don't mean to interrupt, but
you're fine.
Georgetown Water and I want to say this correctly, fire protection is not under their umbrella. And help me, I think that's the best way to say it.
I mean, I think that's a reasonable way to put it. So, I mean, there is, I guess, a little
So
bit.
whose umbrella is it in?
There is a way that it could be managed. There is, we require the fire department, whether the development is in the city or the county, we require the appropriate fire department to sign off on plats that create new lots in new neighborhoods. But there is some room there if there are concerns about the pressure at the, hydrants are installed and there's concern about the pressure levels at the hydrants or the gallons per minute that could be provided, the signature could be withheld and the plat just wouldn't get recorded unless the infrastructure was sufficient to serve that neighborhood. So that's sort of the...
When I deal with it, it's Georgetown Water. I mean,
Yeah, but from what's
They're
been
down my neck
shared,
about
in the
it.
county, fire protection has not been the one of the requirements or responsibilities of GMWSS. And Tim, you help me if
You're on the right track. Within the city limits, since Georgetown Municipal Water Service, their responsibility for fire protection does fall within the city. Outside the city, it is not their requirement to provide fire protection. Their requirement is to provide water. Matt's absolutely right, Ben. I know he hasn't spoke yet, but whenever plans come in, we sit down, we go over the stuff and discuss different things. But even when it comes to line sizing or placement, a lot of that stuff is, like you mentioned, figured out between that developer and then the water service provider. And I'm fortunate with being in the city, we have adequate lines and all that, so it's not an issue for me. But out in the county, I think the biggest thing is infrastructure, honestly, and it's moving forward. I don't know how we.
So going back, I think this all goes back to when the county assisted with getting water lines out into the county. And the focus was totally on water supply, not fire protection. And inside the city, GMWSS is tasked with making sure that fire protection is in that equation. Outside the city limits, it is not tasked with that. And I think it's our job going forward. How do we navigate this, and how do we assure that it's addressed? Anyone else on the court?
I would think that going forward, it should be a condition of approval that they have an engineering study that says there's adequate there. I mean, it looks to me like it'd be pretty simple to have that. One of the requirements for approval is they demonstrate that protection's going to be there.
so does that mean, and I agree with you, it's just, like, where does it fall on responsibility-wise to get that,
Well-
pressure, because you could be talking miles and miles of line.
I mean, I would think the developer would have to prove it's there
Yeah.
to get approval. Is what
Yeah. And would that, I don't know, then does the developer need to pay, Georgetown Water or Kentucky American or whatever to help get those lines there? If they want to move forward, is that?
Rick Costello.
Well, it's along the same line. I remember when Mr. Azevedo, I hope I'm saying that right, made his presentation. I think I even said it during that time. I was kind of shocked about that 460 corridor, how low the pressure is, which, that's what you need when you fight a fire. You got to have volume of water, but you got to have pressure pushing it. So it is, I think this discussion, to one degree or another, has been happening ever since I got on the court 7 years ago. We've talked about how do we manage the growth appropriately. Maybe manage is not the right word, but kind of it is. If we don't consider, because I thought Mr. Azevedo said in his presentation that some homeowner out the 460 corridor talked about some outrageous insurance premiums. I don't remember that number, but I think it was in that conversation. It's because there's no fire hydrants out there and then there's no pressure if they had one. it was like another mortgage payment. It's kind of what I remember. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but in that conversation, so I think we're the body that's got to figure out a way to marry up the water company, whoever that might be, and then, because Kentucky American's in the county. And I also think that, correct me if I'm wrong, if you guys know, I also think he said there's really only two major, GMWSS and Kentucky American. And maybe, like in the northern part where it hits Harrison County, maybe some of those folks get it. I don't know, but he didn't. I asked that question, and so there may be pockets out where they're touching Bourbon County or Harrison County or Owen County. Maybe there are pockets that are getting it from those counties. I don't know, but we're talking about two major suppliers. But somehow we've got to figure out. We keep building, and these folks are building nice homes. Or I don't care if it's a small home, it's your home, and if it's on fire, you want to save it.
Yeah. So back to your question, Mr. Ellison. Here's your issue. If there's on one side of Ironworks Pike, Kentucky American supplies. On the other side of Ironworks Pike, GMWS supplies. There's two different sizes of water line. On the one's 6 inch, one's 3 inch.
Right.
And where are we going to talk about the cost? Where's the developer's responsibility in, and where does the county or the city or whoever develop?
Or the water company.
Or the water company.
I mean, they're in the business too.
And I don't have that answer, but I can tell you that we need to try to address it, and it's a real issue.
Well, there's another thing. People say you got due diligence when you're going to build a home, when you're going to buy a piece of property, and that's true. You need to look around and see wherever you're buying, whatever your intentions are. But there's also, I think, an expectation, which maybe they shouldn't have. But somehow, like I say, I was really shocked. I believe the number he used was like they only had 20 pounds of pressure in some areas going out that 460 corridor. I think I'm remembering correctly. That's what shocked me. That's a garden hose trying to put out a fire. So at least homeowners are going to have to be somehow made aware that that's an issue. Because
so what I would propose is that we, and Whitley y'all probably already have this, Ben and Matt, is a map of the size of the lines in the county for water lines. Does that exist?
That's public utility.
Okay.
Do you think it probably exists?
I know Georgetown Water's got their.
I think we have some of the data. I know GMWSS is usually pretty. They don't want us to share it. They want, if some of that information is to be shared, they want to be the ones to do it. I don't know about Kentucky American. I'm not sure what data we have.
That's the same.
But why would we have that data?
But in my mind, you follow the data, and you get a map of where the lines are and what size they are, and then back from there, you try to address where there's deficiencies, and you identify where deficiencies are. But going forward, we have to put into place a condition of approval that there has to be adequate water line size and enough hydrants in the development. And I don't know what that is, what that number is, or what that looks like, but is that something that you all could help us draft as a proposal to look at?
So I guess the definition of development would have to come in. What is it somebody just putting out a 5-acre tract? Or is it, if it's an urban style development out in the county, which is pretty limited situation. There's not a lot of places out in the county that's going to get these urban-sized developments. It is a requirement with cluster subdivisions where they're more densely located on 1 to 2 acre tracts. If the goal is to provide the entire county with fire service, is that where we're going? So like, I'm in northern Scott County. I don't expect to get fire.
I bet you. and you know, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. How do you address a big problem? One section at a time. And you know, this is not going to go away. And I guarantee you that half the people that live out there think they believe they have enough pressure. When they go build a house in a small cluster development, they're not thinking, well, they see 1 or 2 fire hydrants, they think that they're covered probably. But I guarantee you most people do not realize that they don't have the capacity, if their house caught on fire, that our service doesn't have the flow and water pressure to really protect them. And you know, I'm gonna have John and
They assume the fire department's just going to overcome whatever issue they have.
Yeah.
So what's the protection class out in the county? So what's the highest protection class? There is 10. Okay. How much of the county is, what would be the majority of the county, do you think?
Because the big things in play is how far you are away from the station. And
Right.
if you're within 1,000 feet of the fire hydrant.
Right.
So those two things play into it.
John and Chief Canavy, would you?
The reason I'm asking this question is people should know, like, if they're building out on these areas that have a 3-inch water line, they'll know when they get their insurance rate. But here's the problem. They may not know because some insurance carriers do a blanket PC class for the entire county. So I can tell you that parts of eastern Kentucky, Floyd, Martin, Johnson, McGoffin, they don't section off the county as insurance carriers for protection class because they don't go that far into the data of what's where. So I'm wondering here how some of the insurance carriers actually determine protection classes for different areas, or is it a blanket protection class for the county?
And this is the benefits of having
Some
an
of them are,
insurance
though.
professional.
Some of them are.
Carriers, some are mixed. Some insurance carrier will do it totally different, even within the same county.
Right.
We have people calling the station all the time, asking what their class is because they're charged X number of dollars
Right.
from their insurance company. So we provide them all the data to go back to their insurance company to say, yes, I am within something, was it 5 miles of a fire station? Yes, I am within 1,000 feet of a fire hydrant. So that helps
Right.
their justification to get their insurance low.
But see, like those folks who think that they have a true fire hydrant in front of their house don't realize that.
They don't understand the paint,
Well-
the blue top, the yellow top, the green top.
There's also what they call clean-outs at the end of the line, which is just a 3/4 inch to one subdivision. They're calling that a fire hydrant. That's not a fire hydrant.
That's what you have in Deer Lake.
So, Ben, back to your question. I'm not saying up here, I think we need to identify what we have and where we have it, line size, and where we have adequate and where we have deficiencies. I think that's the first thing. And then I think we bring that back, and then we start moving forward with a plan how to address this. But
The utility companies have all that identification. I mean, they know exactly where their lines are. They can tell you.
I can reach out to Kentucky American and
To answer your question, we do have maps there at the station. I don't know if it came from GIS or who it come from, and I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but we know where Kentucky American lines are, where Georgetown water lines are, and what size lines they are.
so
We do have those maps.
can Chief Canavy and you get with Whitley and see if we can't generate, because it had to come from somewhere.
From the fire department stance is, especially these cluster developments, a lot of them, there's some big homes in there. You all employ employees to go out and do that. They're highly trained. They are highly trained. You all buy top of line equipment. We've got all that. But when we go out to these places that there's no hydrants or there's not adequate water, I can tell you what the outcome's gonna be. Don't matter how good your people are or how top equipment you got. It's the water that's gonna put that fire out. And you know, you got these bigger homes and they get going. If you don't have the water, it's not gonna do anything.
Your hands are tied.
We're tied, yeah.
So,
And I'll put our folks up against anything.
No,
I
and-
mean,
and-
they're highly trained.
you know, and if you don't have the adequate water supply, the safety issue for your people, that's another thing to consider.
That's exactly right, because when they get there, it's like you can't even hardly hold them back, because they know their mission, and they're trying to get it done. And it does, it puts them in this, you know.
Yeah.
it puts
So,
them at risk.
so moving forward, we can, let's get a draft of a map that we feel like is most accurate, identify where we have, and you all tell me, it's like a 6-inch line is what's needed to provide it.
That's the minimum standard.
That's the minimum
That's the
standard.
minimum. And what the problem is we have developers putting a 3-inch line in, which, okay, they can sit there and say they don't have the water at this time to supply a fire hydrant, so they're putting a 3-inch line in. The problem of it is 10 years from now, when we do have the water supply, they're not gonna come back and re-dig up how many miles of 3-inch line to replace it with 6-inch line. So basically, when they're coming in, they should at least put the minimum in of the 6-inch, because that way, when they do have the supply, we can, you could automatically just put the hydrants in the supply.
Okay, so
Coming
If we,
back later is never gonna happen.
And I'm curious, if you put a 6-inch line without adequate water right now, how is that going to really affect your pressure?
Well, but they're gonna adapt it down. You're not gonna have, they may not set the hydrant, but at least,
Gotcha.
see what I'm saying?
I see, yeah.
The hydrant hookup's about
What about the households?
$2,800.
Will that affect the households being in a 6-inch? or-
No, because remember, when you're going from big to small, you're getting more pressure.
So it's going to,
So
okay.
you're gonna have a 6-inch line that's full, and when it narrows down to a 2-inch or a 3-inch going into
So
your
if we
house.
had some sort of minimum 6-inch standards,
NFPA requires a minimum of 6, and they're talking about maybe it's 8-inch line. But if we could, if we could get that on future developments, cluster developments or whatever, at least later on as we move forward, okay, we may have to come in and put some hydrants in, but at least the substructure's there, the infrastructure to do it. But when you put a 3-inch line in, there's nothing there to ever, the only thing you can do is have to dig it all back up and do it, and then your expenses
Twice.
quadruple of when you just laid it originally.
So let's work on the map and with Whitley, and then Ben and Matt, you all tell me, and Court, please, going forward, you were saying, are we talking about everything, or are we talking about cluster development, subdivisions? I think any new construction, the owner has to know what their status is. And I would not want any cluster development or subdivision to have anything less than what's required to address the need for fire protection. That's me. Now, if you're a 5-acre tract and you're a solo home, do we still hold it at that same, or do we say the owner has to sign off knowing that they have a 3-inch line and it's not adequate protection? And we know that they know, because, and I would welcome any feedback.
there's not going to be anybody build a house on a 5-acre tract and knowing that they are somehow responsible to, get line all the way to wherever they got to go to. I mean, they're just not going to do that.
Well, the big thing and what we need is gallons per minute, not pressure. So the bigger the line is obviously going to provide more water, just like if we're pulling up to a house and we got to find a commercial building different than that, we're going to pull a different size line. So we need the bigger lines. When it comes to what you're talking about, ultimately it would be great if we could provide for everybody. I don't know how we could not if we were going that direction, because you're going to need, it's not from the development, it's not from the water line to the development where the issue is going to be. It's going to be on that main, you know what I'm saying? So you're going to have to provide that 6-inch or 8-inch the entire length of everywhere. It's not from that line to the
what you're saying is you need a 6-inch or an 8-inch line on both sides of ironworks. You need a 6-inch or 8-inch line going down.
That's where the
Wherever
water.
you have water.
That's where the water comes from.
But-
And I would say that Georgetown Municipal, just because they weren't tasked with that, I dare say the majority of your county lines are going to be 3-inch. Kentucky American is a for-profit company. They're waiting for this stuff to happen.
Yeah. And to be fair, when everything was rolled out many years ago, that wasn't.
Yes, sir.
We're just glad to get drinking water.
Yes,
And
instead of
GMWSS was not, that was not the mission at that time.
But Judge, I think based on what Tim's saying, I agree with him, but I don't think if we have 3-inch line at the road, we run 3-inch line throughout
No,
the
sir.
subdivision.
No,
We want
no,
to
no,
put 6
no.
throughout it.
Yes.
And
But
then
will that do
it
any
may-
good?
Then come back.
But it may be the responsibility of the developer to upgrade the lines to a point where it's 6-inch line, or you put some kind of pumping. I think you can put a booster thing in there. This is all stuff that we need to discuss, but I don't want to see us making mistakes going forward.
That's my concern. So,
And I think we're there already with subdivisions. They can't, Planning Commission's not going to approve a new subdivision out in the county where they can't get fire protection. That would be the Harbor Village, the Mallard Point, Victoria. Well, I don't know about Victoria, but, so going forward, Planning Commission has every right to deny without fire hydrants being spaced and all that. And that needs, we need the input from the fire chief, and that same as Tim acts in the city. And that's a conversation with Georgetown Water. That needs to start up front when they bring a subdivision in. Say, yeah, you have to provide fire protection. If not, you're going to have to run a line from wherever it is. It may be a 10-inch trunk running 3 miles down the road where it can branch off with a 6-inch to get that pressure. So, and there are deficiencies out there in some of these older, like you're talking about. The only issue with it's complex what they're serving. If they put those bigger lines just in the development and waiting, then you're ending up with low water pressure, stale water, things like that. They got to look at the water quality that's going through there as well. But I guess.
But if you make them upgrade the lines to the next 6-inch line, that addresses that issue, or the next, something 6 or greater, if that's the developer's responsibility.
but I think one of the keys is
My question real quick is, let's say there's 3-inch line, and you put a 6-inch line off of it going into the subdivision. How does that affect, does that do any good? Because are you going to have what you need, because you're going from a 3 to a 6 off of that 3? I mean, that 3 still does not give you more gallons per minute. You essentially have to replace that 3 with a 6 to get to where you want to be. So even off of ironworks, if you have a development go out there and we require it, it still doesn't do anything, because
But it does help you
bottlenecked.
later on if you do finally get
If we
6
do,
to it.
yeah.
Right? I mean,
But
that's where.
I think our first step is, let's get a map that's accurate. Let's follow the data, and then let's come back to this in the next few weeks. And then before you all sit down, could you all just share about the solar ordinance, and then your question about conditional use permits? Thanks, Ben.
Yeah, as we had discussed, I think at a previous workshop, we do have a draft of the solar ordinance that's scheduled to go for a public hearing before the Planning Commission next Thursday. The draft of it should be on our website today. I know we put the packets out for planning commissioners yesterday, so
I
yes.
saw it in the
It is on the
packet.
website? Okay.
I saw it in the packet.
In the packet, okay. Well, I'll make sure it's on the website today if it isn't already. But yeah, the draft is ready. It is, as we looked at before, it's largely based on the model ordinance that Tom Fitzgerald worked on.
And help me understand, you'll present this. Do you have to have 2 readings?
We just need one reading and a recommendation, just like a zone change ordinance would have.
So technically, you could have this on Thursday night, and then it be passed to us on Friday.
Yeah.
There's nothing new in in an ordinance. Alvin, would this be something, if it passes through, that we'd want to put on our agenda for Friday?
I think we need to act as quickly as we can because they're already out here scouting properties.
So on on Thursday, if that passes through, if you would just email me after your meeting,
Okay.
we could have a first reading, because it's,
We'll want to read a summary.
Yeah.
can we make a summary? Can we make a summary?
Rand don't want to read it.
You can make a summary now and
Yeah, because there's nothing changed.
Solar ordinances are good. I did a summary already based on Fitz's now, may have to tweak it.
This is,
Yeah, we could adjust it. I mean, there's not too many, I mean, some of the changes are, we adjusted some of the zoning districts to be specific to our zoning ordinance, and I think we adjusted the time to review the decommissioning plan from 5 years to 3 years based on some of the comments we had at workshop.
Okay.
Yeah. And did you put a bond in place as well?
Yeah, I took out the section that referenced letter of credit and changed that to bonds.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think
And that's the
the other
critical-
change that I made was there was a reference to 10-inch grass. I really just changed that to reference whatever the currently adopted property maintenance code requires.
any other questions about that?
Sounds like Rand's got a sick day coming.
Yeah, but this has been on Alvin's mind, and Alvin's carrying this, and we appreciate your all's help getting us to where we can, because we really feel like we don't want one to be approved and then we have no protection on the backside.
I understand.
And then you all feel the same way.
Yeah.
It's protection for the county and the property owner.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
I agree.
So, and then conditional use permits.
So a lot of you all probably know that in Woodford County, there was an RV park that was proposed for 1,000 RV sites. 500 were going to be in the Woodford County side. The other 500 was going to be in the Scott County side. Based on things that happened in Woodford County, they were not able to get water or sewer access from Woodford County. They had an application in Scott County in front of our Board of Adjustments. It's one of the reasons why I cannot really address that on the Scott County side. And Matt, correct me if I'm wrong, the RV experience, or the Bluegrass RV Experiences has withdrawn
Yeah,
their
they withdrew
application.
their application.
And so my concern, Judge, is that they were trying to get an 400 RV sites plus camping sites in Scott County established based on a conditional use permit. And it was based on primarily recreational use. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And my concern is that I don't think that we should have conditional use permits of that scale that should be allowed in Scott County. That should require a zone change. And I would like to move forward in looking at changing those regulations to not allow something like that, of that magnitude, without, it needs to come under a zone change, not necessarily a conditional use permit. And so, do you want to address that? Me and him have not had this discussion, but I have not said anything due to their application being in front of the board, Scott County's Board of Adjustment.
No, I think I would be agreeable to that. I think I think maybe figuring out where that goes, or whether or not a new zoning district would need to be created, or if we could repurpose an existing zoning district might be something we'll have to figure out. But I do agree that the size and scale of that sort of review of the use would have been taxing for the Board of Adjustment for sure.
Mm-hmm. David Livingston.
how is our current RV park in Scott County zoned?
On
The Whispering Hills
Whispering
on Rogers
Hills.
Gap.
Yes.
That it's zoned A1. It was approved with the conditional use permit as a recreational use. It's not something that I necessarily agree with how it was approved. I don't think that a RV park itself counts as a recreational use, but that's how it was approved. And so it sort of, I guess, in a way, set a precedent that that's an avenue that they could be approved.
I would venture that there's over 100 slots out there.
There's 200.
Is there 200? Well, it's over 100. But it's big.
I know there's more than one out there.
But like,
And they stay
the one
pretty
you're
full.
talking about, it's like 400, correct?
That's correct.
And,
Yeah.
That was pretty big.
yeah, so there's a lot there's a lot going on in considerations, and that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and I would like to look at that. I just think that it's crazy that we are looking at making it on a conditional use permit, not a true zone change. Now, for the court, at this point, the RV park is in a lawsuit with the Woodford County Board of Adjustments. And so this may at some point be coming back to be proposed in Scott County if things work out in their favor.
That's what I was going to ask, are they regrouping or are they just done? So it
I don't
sounds
think
like
they're done.
Probably regrouping.
But I think it's appropriate at this point that if we want to make some changes, that we need to look at making changes in those regulations.
And all we're asking for is just adequate infrastructure, right? And proper zoning.
Proper zoning and adequate infrastructure. And I don't want to belabor this, but they were going to run a sewer and water line across Elkhorn Creek into Scott County to service that area. So it had a lot of magnitude.
And by no means would I support any like package plant.
Yeah.
I don't think the state would either.
No.
I can't speak for them. I know our local ordinances would not allow
They're
that.
trying to get rid of them, so.
So you all, thanks for what you do. Thanks for being here, and appreciate the work that's been started on the comp plan review as well. And I know there's a lot of work left to be, but if we can try to look at, an adjustment to address, future water line requirements for subdivisions and clusters, and then I think notification on anyone, making sure they know, and then if we could work together on that mapping, and with Whitley and John and Chief Canavy, that'd be great.
One other thing, can you all let us know how many buildable lots there are in the county, not within the city? Well, you know what, the city matters too. I'd like to know separate, city, county. And then how many are in the hopper to plans that are in but not approved yet? I'd like, because I heard a number the other day that since 2019, we've added 1,000 lots. And I'm curious as if that's correct, because that is stunning what that does to our school systems as they're built out.
That's why I've been meeting with them a little bit more lately.
So, again, thank you all for coming, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Next thing, I'd like to ask J.R. Brandenburg to come up and give us an update on our county litter abatement push with Swartz Contracting and then the county road department and the city picking up all the bags. JR, thanks for your help.
Good morning, members of the court. Swartz Mowing came in Monday morning, been putting in 10-hour days with 3 crews of about 30 people, hit it hard. So far, we've got over, road department has had 3 crews with pickup trucks picking up the bags that's on the side of the shoulders. We've got over 1,000 bags of trash and roughly 6 tons so far, and I've still got more to go and more tallying to do. And Mr. Bruin, Robert with the city has been helping us pick up. I got to get some numbers from him, but tremendous amount of trash out there. And what's disgusting is you drive down the bypass now and you're seeing more fast food bags that's been thrown out this week, Coke cups.
That'd be crazy.
But they've done a great job, and thanks to Robert in Public Works, it looks good throughout the county.
And you get this clean slate, and it's so refreshing and so nice. And then right behind it, you have some.
It is.
I can't say what I would really like to say. So my proposal to this court Jeff Mudrak and I and JR and we've talked about hiring 2 additional positions. I think we threw out $14 an hour. You're not going to hire anybody for less, and it would be a challenge maybe to hire somebody at 14. But their task would be to work under JR, and they're the roadside litter abatement crew. And I don't think it makes sense to work our tails off and have this contractor come in twice a year and do nothing else in between, no maintenance. Doesn't make sense to me. And this is my only alternative that I have to propose. We could have that, volunteers and we pay them, but I do not like that, the safety factor. I couldn't look myself in the mirror if some kid got hit picking up trash on McClellan Circle. I just don't like that. I would really appreciate your all's feedback on what you all think about moving forward about litter abatement.
I got a question for Jared probably. We've been using these litter abatement grants to fund Schwartz pickups. Could that be applied to having internal personnel to do it? Okay.
I say go fire away.
Would Tim Thompson?
Would those 2 folks be able to handle that volume like Swartz can right now?
No, from my understanding, we would still bring Swartz in.
My thought process would
Yes.
be 2
Why don't
times
we
a year
need 'em
still
once a
bring.
year, though, if you keep
We
it up?
could just make an assessment.
Could we do seasonal? Because I know typically you're going to have like from March until November, and that way you don't.
We could start it seasonal and see how it's going.
Just it gets harder to hire somebody like
Yeah.
that, though, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if they don't,
That's
they're not
the-
going to do it if
That's the
it's not
flip
long
side of
term.
it.
And keep in mind, during that time, if you go with seasonal, which is fine, whatever the court wishes to do, that's when the grass is brown and green and trash shows up more, so
Yeah, you're right.
we could keep them busy throughout.
And I've talked about, like 1 day a week, or they schedule it 2 or 3 times a month, that they collaborate with the city, and you put crews together, because the city's got crews going right now.
Yes.
And sometimes you need traffic control just because it's not, and 2 people can't do that. But if you had collaboration between the city and the county, you could address that. And that was something we've talked about, and I think would be something we could implement. So on Friday, I'd like to bring this back to the court about adding these 2 positions and doing it now. There's no reason not to do it. So, you got any other comments, JR?
No, sir.
Well, don't go anywhere.
Great job.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
JR, thank you.
Great job. Looks great.
So, hold up, JR.
Appreciate it.
So,
I'm sorry.
JR and I, was it Monday you and I went? Tuesday, we went to District 7. We met with their team for about 2.5 hours and talked about our rural secondary program. And before you is a recap of the rural secondary, what's happened in 21, 22, and then recommended projects for rural secondary in 23. You can see 1962 Lemons Mill Road, 2.969 miles, $282,000. And then Kentucky 356 Stone Lane was the other recommendation. That was basically 1.4 miles at $127,000. The reality is that doesn't cover Stone Lane as far as it should. And they're recommending that rural secondary to do the rest of Stone Lane, that other 0.991 miles at $89,000. They would take that flex fund and finish Stone Lane. It is my opinion, it is in the best interest of the court, in the best interest of the county. When you give that flex funds back, it comes back to us. It just does. Yeah. And that finishes that road as well. It just makes sense. So my recommendation to the court would, and JR, would you share the same recommendation?
Yes, sir.
That we do that. Casey will be here on Friday to present this and answer questions. What questions does anyone have for myself or JR right now?
And Stone Lane has been in bad shape for quite a while. It terribly needs it.
You said they're going to be here next Friday?
They'll be here this Friday. Okay. And I just wanted to get this in your hands beforehand. And, JR, thank you.
Thank y'all.
During your discussions, did you have any discussion about 227 upgrades, the safety upgrades?
Yes, sir. JR, can you address Alvin's question about
the 227 safety upgrades they had been talking about? Any further progress or updates?
We discussed it. The last I heard from
Kelly Baker
was he was going to check on where it was at right now and everything. We discussed a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
And it was.
And he's going to check on it and get
our
back
understanding. It was in design.
Yes.
They improved.
That's the last we had heard. That was several months ago.
Yeah. And then we spoke about Kentucky 32, the curve where there was a double fatality. Talked about what improvements could be done, as much as even maybe approaching the owner to take a little bit of the more right of way and cutting those trees down even with the ground and making it a little safer. We discussed, Magistrate Hostetler had a constituent present an ideal of a bypass off 32 to the bypass at Glass Pike, and we presented that. We talked about the end of Payne's Depot, realigning the end of Payne's Depot with Weisenberger Mill to take away that hazard there. There's something else, JR, that
we discussed a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we talked for a long time.
And they were very receptive of everything we brought up.
And we talked quite a bit about, and just make this public, in my opinion, we advocated, both JR and I, for them to really look at the southern alternative route in Newtown. I expressed to them, I asked them to look at an entry point that was east of Stone Road that would not impact any homes, and then following a route that's fairly close to the back of the property lines of those homeowners on Newtown, on US 460, and then coming back up in an empty area on 460 down past Leesburg. So we advocated for that. In my opinion, going straight through Newtown, you can put up signs, but they're not going to slow down. And going north impacts too many homes and too many homeowners. So I'm hopeful that they'll come back with they've got an environmental survey going on of the south route, and I'm hopeful for that, and I'm going to continue to advocate for that. So, and then also Connector Road. We talked about Connector Road quite a bit. They brought that up, and that's, in our mind, that's State Project 1 and 1A. You can't really almost separate them. So, any other questions about roads?
Will they do the same thing, I guess, with the city? Are they meeting with the city for their type of stuff? For their
I think so.
I think so.
Yes.
So.
Well, the Bourbon County side looks great. They're coming along very smoothly.
moving along.
I drive through there about once or twice a week.
When you
Rick.
when you talk to them about the potential of coming from the last leg of the bypass and going down and connecting around Glass Pike, it's a kind of a straight shot.
He did.
Well, when he didn't he tell you guys there was a process that they went
Well,
through?
you have to put it into the shift process. It has to get scored. There's a long process, but we presented it.
Right. Okay.
So-
Well, I appreciate that. And I'm sure the fellow that brought it up to my attention grew up in that area, and he doesn't live there now. He actually lives in town, but he just was concerned about all the accidents that have happened, and several of them have been fatalities through the years on that little stretch. Pretty bad. So
I have two more items, and then I'll ask the court for any items they'd like to discuss. JR, thank you. Generator project. I have an executive summary. I think John shared this with me on the generator project. And when I'm talking about generator project, is provide emergency power to Scott County Fire Department stations 4 and 5, EMS station 2 and Stamping Ground, the road department, and the courthouse. Now, we've gotten ballpark estimates and a plan, and this is a significant expense. When you start looking at what's been presented, it's around $500,000. That's a big expense, but in my mind, not having that is not doing our due diligence and having those. I'm not proposing that we do them all at once or do them now, but I think we need to make a plan to address this need and do it over the next 2 years, or that's what I would propose. The courthouse is a little bit of a outlier. The need for the courthouse is this. Our network, everything runs back here. And we have battery backups that will take care of it, but that's not for if there was an extended time. And what was proposed is looking at a backup generator that would essentially keep the second floor in our network up and going. But the road department, in my mind, needs a backup generator. In the event of an ice storm, whatever it is, tornadoes, they've got to have electricity. And if we don't have electricity there, it's not a good situation either. And then you're talking about fire departments and EMS. Those are probably the first on the list just because of their nature, but the road department and courthouse is important as well. What I would like to do is get your feedback on how to go forward. Do we put out a bid and advertise that the work would be done in the next budget year for all of it, or do we try to break it up over 2 years? Tim Thompson.
Would we have money in this current budget to do maybe like the fire stations and EMS, and then next year do the courthouse and road department?
We'll have that answer for you on later today or next week.
I'm really surprised that we don't have those for fire out.
I was too.
Yeah. So
what is it, Stamping Ground and?
There's Newtown, Homestead, and then Stamping Ground EMS. So, Tim, I like your idea of could we knock a couple, if we had any funds that we could knock a couple of them off now and then do the remainder after July 1. What do you all think of that idea?
Well, we got the good news last week about the grant, $3.1 million that was scheduled that we had planned to use for the broadband. We have that money freed up now for something else, and this would be a good use for that, I think. So,
No,
I agree.
Along those lines, Michelle and I met with Michael George and R.J. Palmer for over an hour yesterday. And the purpose of the meeting was to talk about ARPA dollars and making sure that, we still have to, even though that the Treasury final ruling changed, it frees up those dollars to where they're almost recognized as general fund expenditures. We still have to document and make reports. And RJ and Michael will be here on Friday, and they're going to make a presentation to the court that outlines a recommendation they have to streamline that process. So they'll be here, but we also talked about they're going to present an updated with this $3 million change where we had earmarked $3 million for our broadband. We now have that $3 million that comes into play on what I think are the two main priorities: the sheriff's office and the clerk's annex and the EMS station. So they're going to present a plan to you all or information to you all to help us make a decision on how we finance that, pay for it, and over how much time. So I'm trying to be out in front of this before we do our budget. So they'll be here on Friday, and I think that'll be good information. I think the thing to do now is see about putting a bid out or getting an RFP put together, or, bid out and go from there on that. But
Time, I don't know that you could even get them done in this budget year. We're already in March, and this hardest thing is to get any supplies to do anything.
I'd be curious because
money earmarked, I guess, out of this budget.
we'll see what money we have available, and then we'll report back the first of the week via email, and we'll talk about it next week. A couple of them are not complicated, like Newtown and the EMS and stamping around. They're not complicated, and they're low-hanging fruit.
So would that be on state bid list? I mean, would you actually have to go out and bid it out and go through that whole 3 week?
You probably would the work.
Okay.
Like you can maybe get some of the generators might be on a state list. I'm not sure. It's been a while. But,
Okay.
The install would be.
Okay.
We'll try to
probably do some
investigate.
engineering expenses too.
Yeah. We'll try to investigate. Now, last thing on my list is our PVA, Tim Jenkins, has presented to me a need for consideration, and I'll share this with you all. He's proposing that we consider another aerial flight spring of 2023 or thereabouts. The need for this stems from, and the cost would be approximately $250,000. But what we're looking at is just between the last time this was done and now, we've added 992 parcels of land and 1,041 improvements to land, mostly houses. And this is critical for PVA to maintain the accuracy of tax rolls. And then it also helps our fire departments and EMS have accurate information about making calls and such as well. And this is also shared with the Planning Commission as well. So having an updated flyover and that.
When's the last time I did it?
The last time it was done.
5 years, wasn't it?
19.
I think it was at 19. So.
Yeah, he tries to do it.
It's neat to look back and you can go, I've been looking at a lot.
But Judge, the last time we did this, wasn't this split between the city and the county?
I believe so.
Hey, if what he told me was correct too, is Franklin and Bourbon are both doing it next spring, so they could do one flyover over all three counties, and it would help offset some of our expense because they would be in the air one time and do all three. But we'll ask him and verify that.
All right.
And Rand, real quick, is that would be a contract for next spring? Is there a problem with that since there'll be a new court?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
So I'll put that on the list of discussions about potential collaboration with our partners at the City Hall.
Sounds good.
Now,
Can we do it by population split?
does any other court member have anything to add?
Judge, I was going to ask you, can you update us on where we're at with the voucher program? As far as when we used to have the drop-off days on Saturdays, and where are we at with Rumpke?
We have a scheduled meeting with Rumpke on Tuesday, and we're going to discuss how to formalize possible voucher program where any citizen could have access up to 3 pickup truck or small trailer loads of trash could be, dropped off at the transfer station and would be free of charge to the citizen. I think this keeps illegal dumps from occurring at a higher rate. I think it keeps it off the side of roads in different places, and if they have that access. I do not think a Saturday dump day is the answer, just because the flexibility of having the voucher, you won't have those big crowds and such on a Saturday like we have in the past.
And you take care, you can do it when you can do it.
Yeah.
That's a busy road, too.
Yeah. So we'll report back on next week's meeting.
Thank you.
And if anybody would like to go with us, what time is that meeting on Tuesday? 11 a.m. out at Rumpke. With that said, any other questions?
Justice Building?
Justice Building, today at 3 o'clock.
You got a lot of meetings going.
I do. I don't know if I knew what I was doing when I got into it. At 3 o'clock, Rand and I are closing on 3 properties at the priority site. The site is the worst kept secret in Georgetown. I think since we're closing on them,
That'll be public record.
it's public record. So we're closing on 3 properties, and it's the area bound by North Broadway and Washington all the way back to Water Street inside of Cooper Alley. Not every property there is being considered, but all but one is. We're still the design process is fluid. It's still going. Right now, we're at an 84,000 square foot facility, and it's the addition of an additional family court judge, and the way it sits where it sits, it's just a big piece of building, and a lot of requirements for state offices, CDW, drug court. What else, Rand?
Obviously, the judges, the circuit clerks, rooms for prosecutors, witnesses,
Bailiffs.
drug court. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot contained in there.
When do they have scheduled for completion?
Well, there's a condemnation case going right now that involves one owner. We're working through that. It takes time. It's just really too early to say.
know.
Yeah.
So talking what
was
18-month build probably, right?
Yeah.
What was their price tag estimate on?
I think originally it was $35 million. And what's going on right now is with inflation, the supply chain issues, we are actually going back to the legislature and AOC and advocating for additional funds to do it right. We're not building a Taj Mahal, but we're building a building that's going to meet the needs of the community for 50 years. And it would be a crime if we didn't have enough square footage to meet the needs. And I can assure you that it's going to be a nice public facility, and it should be. And it has to be built to stand the test of time. So it's just an expensive venture.
But it's not county money.
It is not. That is appropriated 100% from the state legislature and the administrative office of the courts. So now once that bond debt is satisfied, it becomes property of the county, is the way I understand it.
Judge, on terms of the forecast of when you're all going to be able to close on those properties and they're going to start tearing houses down, can you give us like a timeline? Outside of the condemnations?
Yeah,
the next couple months?
I would hope sometime this summer, late summer, that they'd start doing demo, but I can't promise that.
Okay.
It's just, there's so much that goes into the process.
Understand.
But it's cleared environmental, it's cleared geotechnical, it's cleared all those issues.
I would think, and we'll probably do more closings, I would think, maybe later this month, or certainly April, May.
Yeah, that's our hope. So, any other questions?
Once we start getting those properties and before we tear them down, I think it'd be beneficial for us to be able to utilize them for fire, EMS, police, sheriff, to go in there for us for search, cutting holes, all that, but then they can practice stuff with sheriff's department. You don't get that opportunity too often, so if we could do that before we tear them down.
Let's talk, let me understand what you're talking about. And
Just
It's
train.
fun.
Yeah.
They did it in one of ours.
I've done it before too.
All right. Any public comment from anyone in our audience? Oh, Michelle Wise Ray, please come to the podium.
I would like to have you all consider the ABC regulatory fees, something we could possibly talk about in some upcoming court meetings. I can provide the KRS. Talked with Representative Pratt, and he stated that what we had seen before is appropriate for Scott County to have an ABC regulatory fee. Unfortunately, since there is nothing in place now, I couldn't be able to project what the revenue would be from that, since there's all that's paid now is just for a license fee. We don't know how much they have in sales, and there's just a handful of companies anyway that are selling, stores that are selling. So this could generate some income for the county that we haven't tapped into yet. But I just want to keep that in your all's mind. Maybe we can speak of it next Friday.
No, we need to put that on the list. I appreciate it, Michelle. Anyone else?
I was just gonna say, looked at the soccer fields and stuff going on. They're moving a lot of dirt, got a lot of stuff going on out there. If you haven't been out there, it's kind of hard to get out there and look at it because of the kind of you can't get there. But I was on Lemons Mill's roof, so I got to.
Mr. Ellison has access to the roof next door. And that was a good picture.
Yeah.
So, that work is, they're about
They did a
done
soccer
with
ball off the roof.
the finished grade on the, they're about finished with the finished grade on 2 of the fields. Rough grade on the parking lot area. One issue, as you come in off Schoolhouse Road, there was a roundabout that was done prior to it was 4 or 5 feet low. They've adjusted the grade coming up, the road coming away into the park out of the roundabout, but we're going to have to build a 4-foot retaining wall.
I didn't see it that high.
Well, I'm just going by what Ramona has showed, and we can go out there and look at it. I'd love to go out there and get your opinion. But because the Legacy Trail is supposed to go around that roundabout, and then it'll go out and connect out onto Schoolhouse and go away. There's just a lot going on there.
Yeah.
But we're going from, basically a rough field that was out in the, that didn't have very much level playing areas to where it's going to be really nice, and you're going to have access to bathrooms and shelter, and it just it'll be great. And we're still waiting on the TAP grant for the Legacy Trail. We really thought that they were, from the questions they asked and from the feedback, we thought that we'd know something by now. At the meeting the other day, it was shared that they think it's on the governor's desk, just waiting to be announced who gets those TAP grants. So,
And then Joe and I are meeting with the Moats group Tuesday for the cluster. Get some ideas on.
So there's been a lot of talk about the need for additional field space. Dwayne had a contact with the Moats group.
I think it's Moats. They get
Moats.
mad at me when I say it wrong.
Just to have a dollar figure that we could share. So,
Thank you, because I've had, since our last meeting where we had the compromise, I've had several people come to me about it too, so thank you.
thank you. Anything else from anyone? With that said, Kara, do you need something? With that said, we are adjourned. Yes, sir. Oh,
You can come Tuesday.
Rick Costello.
And Dwayne's got one too, I think.
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably, I think most everybody in the room knows about it, but the Not Alone Pregnancy Center, our banquet is tonight, and I think there are a few seats still available if you're interested in going. It's at, the doors are open at 6, and it's at Northside Christian Church, and it's $30 a seat. But there's a gentleman, I've never met him, haven't actually heard his story, but I understand he's got a unique one that's going to be our main speaker, a fellow by the name of Gary Upton. So if you're interested in going, see me now because it's tonight. And
On your way, you can come and get some fish at the Knights of Columbus Fish Fry over at Cardone.
What time's that start?
What time's that start?
5 o'clock.
I'm going to be up there. I'm going to be up there hauling chairs.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the afternoon. Appreciate your time.
Appreciate y'all update your map. It doesn't have to last late to bypass.